Okay, we will continue with the nature of emotion uh, of chapter 10. So basically, emotion refer to subjective states or wide range of subjective states. That mean subjective feelings such as love, fear, sadness, anger, happy, and so on. So this actually the pictures of emotion can be sadness, happy, angry, love, and so on. So when we talk about emotions, we talk about feeling aspect of consciousness. That means when we conscious, it affects also our feelings. So that's a feeling aspect of consciousness that characterized by physical arousal. So when we have a feeling, when we have emotions, it's showing on our behavior. For example, if we are happy, it's showing on our face. We smile. If we are angry, it's showing on our facial expressions. So facial expressions or on behavior is considered physical arousal. Because it's translated into behavior. So if it is not translated into behavior, it's still within ourselves. So people outside do not know our emotions if we are not translate our emotion into behavior. Okay, so this is the slide. This is a slide when we show when we have emotions. It's from within. The emotion comes from within, but it transforms into physical arousal. Like for example, if we sad, people wouldn't know if we didn't show it on our if we didn't transform it into behavior. So in order to transform into behavior, we need to have physical arousal. For example, when you are happy, you have that kind of physical arousal from emotion transfer into physical arousal that you're showing on your face. You smile, your eyes blinking and showing and your face lighting up. So that's kind of physical arousal showing on behavior. So this feeling communicates to the outside world. People outside can see how you feel. If you didn't show on your behavior, even though you feel the emotion, people don't know because emotion is considered private to you until unless if you are showing on your behavior. So the nature of emotion, there are a lot of emotions that exist in this world. We can experience lots of emotions such as anger, fear, disgust, depress, pride, shame, and so on. So when we show this kind of emotions, it's actually involve physical arousal. As you can see in the slide, there's a red color, there's a black and a blue inside the human body. So that's considered as a part of physical arousal. For example, when you are happy, see here happy, showing that the redness in the body is very clear here. When you are depressed, see all blue and black, and you neutral, you don't have any feeling. So when you are happy, the physical arousal is so obvious here. When you feeling love, it's part of your body showing some response. Depressy inside the whole body become blue and black. So it's actually emotions have a physical arousal, and this physical arousal will be shown on the behavior on our behavior. So emotion, like I mentioned, emotion is internal until you show it, you show it on your behavior. So inherently private to people until if you show it on your behavior, people will know about your emotions. So emotion may be experienced without externally visible signs or obvious effects on behavior. Of course, some people they're very good at hiding their emotions, so we do not know what they are feeling at the moment because they're very good at hiding their emotion. So because emotion is internal states, until the person exhibit on their behavior, people outside will not know about the emotion of the person because it's internal, and sometimes the emotion doesn't show any sign, especially if the person know how to hide their emotion. So emotion can be, there are two types of emotion, primary and secondary. Primary is considered universal. So emotion have distinctive physiological patterns and corresponding to facial expression. So what is meant here, first, emotions are universal to any culture, any people in this world. That means there are several types of emotion that are universal. That means if feeling happy, the facial expressions like a smile because we feel happy. So across the world, it's also the same. People will recognize that smile as a show, as a indications of a happy emotion. And when we feeling anger, we showing on our face. So other culture also will be able to recognize that's actually a feeling of anger and so on. So the primary emotions, there are few. For example, love, joy, anger, fear, sadness, surprise, and disgust. Wherever you go in this country, in this world, these feelings or this emotion, love, joy, anger, fear, will be the same, will be interpreted the same, even though you go to any country in the world, people will recognize that kind of feeling that you experience. Secondary emotion comprise various blend of emotion that differ from culture to culture. So some culture, the way they express their emotions may be different from universal way of express emotions. So secondary emotion, if you go to any different culture from yours, you will find the way they show certain emotion that are not primary, the secondary emotions may be very difficult to interpret because the way they show it is different from the other culture in this world. So these slides, surprise, joy, sad, fear, and disgust, anger. So all these six are considered primary emotion. If you go to any country in the world, they will show the same facial expression. If they want to show surprise, joy, sad, so they will have this kind of surprise. So if you see people with this kind of facial expression, is interpreted as surprise. So any country in this world, any culture in this world will interpret the same with this kind of physical expressions, will interpret as surprise. And fear, anger, disgust, and anger. So these are actually primary emotions. So anywhere you go, people will display the same expression if they want to show this primary emotion. Secondary emotion, however, is a bit different from culture to culture, country to country. It's expressed normally. Secondary emotions often expressed with physiological component, for example, including respirations, heart rate, body temperature, and so on. It also expressive component, sometimes facial display of certain culture is a bit weird that you cannot interpret as your culture. So the way they express the anger for the different facial display, you cannot interpret as your culture interpret it. So experiential component, subjective feeling, that means they may have a subjective feeling they show on their facial expressions that maybe not universal, so you cannot interpret this kind of facial expression that shown by them based on your culture. And behavioral response such as hugging, kissing, and hitting. So some culture, when they want to when they want to greet others, sometimes they hug, sometimes they kiss, even hit others. So you cannot, for example, you cannot interpret people hitting each other as kind of hatred to each other, because certain culture maybe this is the way how they greet others. So it's kind of cultural context is depend on the interpretations of cultural context. So if we are from other culture and see the way they behave, we cannot simply judge them, because that's maybe the way that their culture accept that kind of actions or behavior response to certain facial expression or certain emotion. So when we talk about emotion, there are two things that closely related to emotion. For example, mood and temperaments. So these are two concepts in emotion that you can find in any textbook under emotion topics, mood and temperaments. So temperament are those dimensions of also personality are largely related to genetic. So when we talk about temperament, we can say it is more related to genetic than environmental context. So it exists in most ages and most society and shows some consistency across situation. So temperament exists in different contexts, different culture, different age variations, and also consistent from one situation to other situation. And these temperaments consider stable. That means it's not fluctuates. Stable. And for example, highly active and enthusiastic people can get irritated with low pace employees. For example, if you are some people they have that kind of personality. For example, type A personality, they do not like people who behave or do things quite slow. For example, while waiting for a bus, people just take time, or while doing something take time. So for some people who have this kind of urgency kind of personality, they do not those who they do not tolerate people who are low pace, people who takes time slowly, even though in the urgent situation. So this considered as a temperament because the person who have that kind of traits that's always in urgent states, that's considered as temperament. Is stable. If they are kind of this kind of personality. In certain situations, it will also display the same kind of personality in different situations. Okay, that's what it's meant. For example, if we are a person who talk very fast, and then easily get irritated by person who speaks very slow or acts very slow. So in many occasions, like at school or at university, in the shopping markets or anywhere you go, if you are a person who are quick in your actions, you will find it annoying if you have to deal with the person who are a bit slow in anything they do. So if you are a very active person, or you do not like people who are doing things slowly, very slow, you just get irritated if people do not do quite fast in their movement. So it's not only in these situations, or you will experience that feeling temperament in any situation if you face with this kind of slow paced employees or slow paced kind of people. I hope you understand my explanation. It's like if the temperaments, the emotions or kind of temperament that you feel normally consistent across the situations. Okay, moods. Maybe you come across that people say, I do not have mood. I do not want to go because I'm not in the mood, for example. So mood is generic terms referring to general feeling resulting from specific situation. So mood is actually referring to emotion that color the person perception about the world. Of course, we have mood in the morning, we have different mood in the afternoon, we have different moods. So mood normally related, for example, depressions, anger, anxiety. Sometimes we have that feeling of the moods without any reason. Because you just wake up in the morning and you feel I'm not in the mood to go to class. For example, I'm not in the mood to talk to others. So mood also shorter in durations and linked to specific occurrence. For example, maybe you not feel in the mood because you do not have enough sleep, because you have problem with your friend, because you keep thinking about your tests, because you are being it's kind of shorter in durations according to textbook, and it's linked to specific things that occur or specific occurrences or events that happen toward you or that's happened involving you. So there's another ability to understand emotion of others. We call it empathy. So empathy is the ability to understand emotion of others. The key to human characteristics, mood is actually very important. Even though sometimes you don't like to be to deal with people who have mood, because mood is keep changing. So you cannot predict sometimes those who always experience moods. So you it's actually key to human characteristics, both interpersonal relationship when you have to deal with people in interpersonal relationships like a colleague to colleague, friends to friends, employee to customer, employee to boss, or in organizations such as when you work with the other colleague, you will experience this. So it's a human characteristic. Mood is one of the human characteristics that we have to deal with. So empathy, specifically, mood is one word called empathy. Is originated in Germany. Is man feeling. So empathy is, in other words, is feeling. So defining emotion depend on the theory. So in order to define the emotions, sometimes it depend on the theory. So definition of emotion is quite depending on the theory used. If we use this kind of theories, that's our definition. So basically, simple definition of mood is the experience of subjective feeling. So any definition of emotion actually is referring to the subjective feeling, but specifically to mood, the simple definition is subjective feeling which have positive or negative values for individual. So explanation how emotion arise. Um, there are four explanation how emotion arise. So if we want to know how suddenly people experience emotions, or how emotion occurred on people or on us. So there are four explanation how emotion arise. First one is emotion starts with a subjective feeling. So it starts with a subjective feeling. That means we experience emotion first, and then this emotion lead to physiological change such as increased rates, heart rate, then followed by appropriate behavior. What is meant here, subjective feeling start with a subjective feeling lead to physiological change. First, you experience emotions and this showing on your behavior. For example, you feeling sad and then your heart beat faster. So that's what is meant by first explanation of how emotion arise. It start with a subjective feeling. That's mean it start with your emotions towards something. For example, it start with your feeling. Either you are happy, you are sad, or you are angry at someone, or you feeling depressed, or you feeling excited. It start with the feeling first. For example, here subjective feeling. Subjective, why it is subjective? Because it's based on the interpretations of the person. Is the person thinks he or she feel that feeling happy, so that's his or her subjective feeling. So other people may interpret that kind of feeling differently. For example, maybe the other person interpret that as a neutral feeling, or maybe just a normal feeling, but certain people they interpret it as a sad, happy, or whatever definitions of the feeling. So what is meant here, feeling is a subjective. So based on the first explanations, emotion begin as a subjective feeling and then leads to physiological change. So here it start with the feeling and then it start showing on the behavior, physiological change. For example, when you sad, you cry. When you sad, so the physiological change, the changes that happen inside your body is your heart beat faster, and then it's showing on your behavior. That's after that you are crying, you cry after that. So it start with the subjective feeling and then lead to physiological change. For example, your heart start to beat faster because you sad. It's showing on your emotions. It's showing on your physical arousal. For example, if you're happy, before it's showing on your face. Before you smile, it's actually your heart is beating faster, showing that's a physical arousal, and then it show on your face. That's how physical. The first explanation here is that arrow is showing that this cause this feeling cause the changes in the physiology that happen in our body. Second interpretation is emotion begin with the physiological change and then lead to subjective feeling. So the second explanation is the opposite of the first one. See, the first one, subjective feeling start first and it lead to physiological change. Second, it start with the physiological change and then lead to subjective feeling. What is meant here? It start with your physiological changes first, and then it's lead to feeling. So what is meant here, your physiological change first. For example, your heart start beating faster, and then you feel sad, or you feel happy, or you feel anger, or you feel excited. So it start with the physiological changes first. Either your heart beat faster, or your blood become boil. For example, before you get angry, you have this kind of symptom. For example, heartbeat faster, and then you are feeling hot, for example, and then it's actually leads to the feeling. So that's the explanation. You start with the physiological changes first, and then these changes lead to the subjective feeling to exist. To appear. So third explanation, subjective feeling and physiological changes occur simultaneously. So this one, the first one, subjective feeling lead to physiological changes, and physiological changes, second one, lead to subjective feeling, but the third explanation, both occur at the same time. So both occur at the same time. For example, your heart beat faster, at the same time you feel sad. So these two, the feeling and the changes of the physio, come together at once. So you're feeling sad, at the same time your heart beat faster, and you're feeling you're feeling so it's kind of the physiological changes, and these happen at once simultaneously. So the other explanation, the fourth explanation, emotion arise because of complex interaction between the environment, between the nervous system. So cognitive is very important because this actually, your feeling can be based on your evaluation of something. If your evaluation of the thing that you see is negative, it will actually influence your feeling. Your feeling may become negative because of your cognitive evaluation. So that's the importance of cognitive factor. The environment, maybe the environment outside, when you see things outside, you evaluate based on what you see, then it will affect your emotions. The nervous system, that's mean the brains, the nervous system, the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system also contribute, because when your eyes detect, or when your cognitions interpret as a threat, and your nervous system will react to that. Maybe your heart start beating faster because you expect that from your cognitive evaluation from the environment, that will be a threats coming in. For example, when you're about to present, and then if you have this judgment that people will judge you, people will laugh at you, then you tend to have a feeling. For example, you tend to feel nervous. That's why people say, many trainers said before, in order to avoid become nervous, you have to think positive. to think positive, instead of consider your feeling as nervous. You have to consider is excitement, for example, because nervous system, they have the system called peripheral. Remember sympathetic and parasympathetic that we studied in chapter 3. So sympathetic is when the body threats, when the body detects the threats, or the body consider there's a threat exists. So the heart start to beat faster, the eyes start to dilated, and lots of problems actually showing by our body in response to the threat. So after the threat is been dealt with. For example, the body think that is no more threat exists in their in the surrounding. So the paranervous system will tell the body to cool down, to because no more threat already. So the movement of the body, the heartbeat become normal, and the hand shaking. Before this you are shaking quite heavily, and then everything become calm down. If you are always in this kind of sympathetic mood, it will have problems to your to the functions of the heart, because heart cannot beat faster all the time. Because if the heart beat faster all the time, it will affect your cardiovascular system, and if it is affect cardiovascular system, it affect the whole system of the body. So these, according to fourth interpretations, emotion arise because of the complex interaction between cognitive, between environment, between nervous system. That's four explanations. So this is basically the explanation number 4. Emotion arise because of as a result of a complex interaction between cognitive, between environment, and also nervous system. Okay, theory of emotion. There are many theory of emotions. First one is from the perspective of physiological theory, and then come up with evolutionary theory, and then cognitive appraisal theory. So we have three explanations of regarding the theory, but the specific one, there are two explanations or theory that explain the theory based on the physiological perspective, and there's also a theory that explain based on the evolutionary perspective, and the third one, the theories, there are two theories that explain emotion based on the cognitive appraisal perspective. So first one, we're going to start with first one, James-Lange and Cannon-Bach. So basically, when we talk about physiological theory, is stated that all emotions have common physiological base, which is controlled by the brain. Because when we talk about physiological, we talk about what's inside our body, the movement of the movement of the blood, cardiovascular, that we study in chapter 3. That's physiology. So here, emotion is mentioned under this theory. All emotion have common physiological basis, which is controlled by the brains. So remember, when we study chapter 3, there's a part of the brain that secrete the hormones that control our emotion. So expressed through sympathetic and parasympathetic division of autonomic nervous system. So basically, autonomy is fall under the peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord, and peripheral, there are few divisions of peripheral nervous system, and one is autonomic nervous system, which consists of sympathetic and parasympathetic. So like I mentioned, when the body detects the threats from outside, it's important because it is a natural way how we react to how we protect ourselves. So when the body when the body detects some threat outside, for example, maybe there's enemy, maybe there's a animal or wild animal, or maybe something that make us feeling scared. So sympathetic will release its hormone, saying that asking or order, give instruction to the body to prepare for the threat, for example. That's why our heart beat faster, and our hands start to shake, and also we experience some hotness, because that's the way how we prepare for the threats. And after the threat go away, for example, when we know there's no more enemy, there's no more wild animal, the how we come down from the threats, the parasympathetic of nervous system will tell the body through the brain, will tell the body that there's no more threat. So parasympathetic order the organs or anything inside our physiological body to calm down, so to become in the normal state. So that's why sometimes we experience alertness, heart beats faster, and other time we become relaxed. So that's because it's controlled by the autonomic nervous system and the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. So when we talk about emotions theory based on physiological theory, so physiological basis are actually controlled by the brains under the peripheral nervous system, parts divided into autonomic and somatic nervous system. So autonomic basically is the specific nervous system that responsible for controlling the emotions done by sympathetic and parasympathetic. Another thing regarding the theory of emotion is facial expressions hypothesis. Facial expression hypothesis suggests that the action of facial movement can create emotion. So it is important, and then by giving feedback to the brain that suggests emotional response. So what is said here, facial expression, the action itself from the facial. That's why when we people say, even though you experience sadness, even though you experience bad thing in your life, try to smile, because smile can create positive emotion. Because based on the facial expression hypothesis, action or facial movement can create emotion, and this give a feedback to the brain to suggest the response to the emotion. So basically, what is meant here, what is meant by this facial expression hypothesis, when you experience sadness in your life, or when you experience bad thing on your life, it may affect your life. It may affect your emotions. So according to this theory, even though you experience bad thing in your life, if you are showing good emotions, this good emotion will create this good facial movement showing on your face will create emotion. So for example, looking at these photos of feeling, looking at the babies, photos of the babies, even though you may be feeling sad, but looking at this baby's facial expression can give you happiness, actually, can create emotions. For example, when you look at these photos, it give you some happiness. So actually, facial movement can create emotions, and this emotion is sent to the brain, and then it will affect your emotion. Your emotion will be consistent with the photos that you see. For example, when you look at the photo that have the COVID-19, people fall on the on the streets, is actually affect your emotion, because looking at that photo create emotions. So the negative photo create negative emotions, is sent to the brain, and brain respond by feeling panic, or by feeling afraid, or feeling scared. So if you look at good things, for example, looking at babies, is a good give you is a good photos, is a happiness photos. So it will create good or happy emotions, and this happy emotion we send to the brain. The brain will tell to provide emotional or good emotion response. It depends on the facial movement that you see, or photo of actions that you see. If it is negative, it also create negative emotions, and then the brain will send a response is actually negative. So it's depend according to the photo or action that you see, or facial movement that you see. This actually based on theory facial expression hypothesis. Okay, James-Lange theory, the first theory by James-Lange. According to this theory, emotions and pattern of physiological arousal people experience during the emotion is happen at the same time. Remember, there are four types of facial of how emotion arise. The third one, subjective feeling and a physiological arouse happen at the same time simultaneously. So this theory basically support that kind of how emotion arise, because it's mentioned here emotions and pattern of physiological arousal happen at the same time during the emotion. So even in the environments lead to physiological change that interpreted as emotions. So basically what you see outside in the environment can lead to physiological change that interpreted as emotions. So bodily change follow directly the perception of excite. In fact, that's mean our emotion occurred is emotion. So what we see outside is affect our physiological change. For example, when you look at when you look at event that happen outside in the environment, for example, when you look at thing outside in the environment, it actually affects your physiological change, whether your heart become beating faster, or it actually what you see outside affect your physiological change, and this actually affects your emotion at the same time. So people experience emotion may exhibit same physiological. So this is actually several critics regarding James-Lange theory. According to the critics, they said people experience emotion uh, may exhibit same physiological states. So, for example, what is meant here, people experience different emotions, may exhibit some physiological states, some may exhibit same physiological states. For example, crying. Crying, if the physiological states, emotions, happy and sad. So what is meant by this statement is people may experience different emotions but may exhibit same physiological state. For example, when you are sad and happy, you can both crying, isn't it? You cry because good thing happen to you. You cry because of bad thing happen to you. So physiological state may you may experience the same but have different emotion. For example, I mentioned here, when you getting married, you cry. When you sad, you also cry. So that's the explanation. This actually the critic or comment or problems regarding James-Lange theory. And it is also mentioned another problem with this theory by James-Lange theory. Physiological change happens quite difficult to be noticed by persons. The cue are weak. So what is meant here? Uh, Physiological change, if happen at the same times, physiological change take times to be noticed, but emotion is happen very quick. I mean, to start, sometimes you do not know when it is arise, when it is start, when it is occurred. You do not know, but physiological change happen a bit late and sometimes quite difficult to be noticed. So that's one of the problems with James-Lange theory, and it is mentioned here: emotion occur quickly, faster than physiological change. So how come emotions and physiological change happen at the same time? Because this theory stated that emotion and physiological change happen at the same time, and the critic mentions that physiological change is quite difficult to be noticed, and emotion occur quickly. I mean, faster than physiological change. That means physiological change are too slow to be source of this. So if this theory mention emotion and physiological change happen at the same time, so it's not really consistent with this explanation. You see, emotions, according to this theory mentioned here, emotions and physiological arousal happen at the same time. So here it said emotion occur normally quicker than physiological change. So it can't be happen at the same time, emotions and physiological change. And physiological arousal occur without experience of emotion. So physiological change is the same as physiological arousal. So sometimes happen without experience of emotion. So the theory of James-Lange is mentioned that physiological arousal or physiological change happen at the same time as emotion. So according to the critic, it says sometimes physiological arousal occurred without the experience of emotion. For example, during your exercise, when you exercise, or when you run on the treadmill, or when you jog, or when you do some exercises, sometimes you do not have any feeling. You just but your heart beat faster, and you become hot, because of you become sweating, you're feeling hot, and then your heart beat faster before that. So it's actually you do not have feeling this thing, heart beat faster, feeling hot, because of you doing exercise. Actually, it's nothing to do with emotion. So there's a critic saying that if you say that physical arousal or physical changes happen at the same time as emotions, so it is actually against these statements here, that physical arousal occur without the experience of emotions. Okay, the second theory of emotion under physiological perspective is emotion originate in thalamus, in the brains, uh, which send the informations or message from receive the information from sensory organs. So basically, this theorem argues that body and mind are activated independent in the experience of emotion. So James-Lange mentioned that emotion and physiological arousal happen at the same time. This theory, Cannon-Bart mentioned that body and mind are activated independently in the experience of emotion. So when emotion happens, physical arousal and mind have activate independently, not at the same time. So physical arousal and behavior response, emotional experience happen independently. That means it's not depend on each other. It's not simultaneously independent, but it's actually separate, activate separately. So Cannon-Bart theory of emotions involve sensory organs. Sensory organ detects from the environments, and it's sent to the brains, and then cerebral cortex tell the motor or the skeletal muscle to act, and this actually also reacts to the sense or to the brain, the information from the brain, from the skeletal muscle. So basically, Condenbart involve these three elements: physiological arousal, motor behavior, that's mean by skeletal muscle, and actually send sensory organs send informations to the to send the information to the skeletal muscle, and as well as the physical arousal. So we move to evolutionary theory, the theory of emotions based on the evolutionary perspective. As you know, now maybe you are not aware that evolution is actually based on Darwin. Darwin come with the evolutionary theory that's animal or any organisms exist because of their ability to survive. So Darwin focused on the survival of the fittest. That means the strongest will survive, the weak will die. So the strongest we survive because we be able to adapt to the environment, we have the ability to survive because we are strong. But those who are weak will be defeated and die. So according to evolutionary theory, mind, we human being, which was created with mind, we have mind, was designed, actually we have mind, this mind uh, help us to survive. And according to Darwin or evolutionary theory, that mind was designed to solve the problem and emotions serve as an adaptive purpose. So we survive because we have mind and also we have emotion, which help us to adapt with the environment and to help us in our survival from the old time until now. So emotion help us to adapt with the environment, and these also help us to survive, to protect ourselves from the danger, from the threats, from the wild animal and so on, and survive. So emotion is very important because it help us to survive according to Darwin or evolutionary theory. So evolutionary theory is based on the writings of Charles Darwin, who claimed that emotional expressions are common to all culture. That means all people from different culture have emotional expression that help them in their survival. So these emotions, according to Darwin, is inherited from our ancestor. That means ancestor use emotion to survive and to continuously survive in this world until we could live in this world. So according to Darwin's, emotion is inherited. That means it's a genetically and we inherit from our parents and grandparents and so on, from our ancestors. So evolutionary theory of emotion is stated here: mind to solve the problem. The use of mind is to solve the problems, but the use of emotion is to help us to adapt to the environment. Okay, another theory based on cognitive appraisal. Cognitive appraisal formulates how cognitive judgment cause people to experience different emotion, and cognitive interpret the emotion differently. So what is meant here, we use the mind or the cognitive to evaluate on something. So when we look at something outside in the environment, we tend to evaluate, we tend to use the cognitive to judge using our cognitive, and this judgment affects our emotion. For example, when you saw thing outside, and then your cognition, you interpret the information using your cognition, and this information that you interpret actually affect your emotion. Sometimes this is actually quite serious if your cognitions misinterpret something. For example, how many of us experience problem because of misinterpretations or misjudgment of our behavior. For example, people in the relationship sometimes break up because of misjudgment about the partner. For example, when people see their partner talking to others, or maybe look like they are cheating, but actually they are not cheating. But because of the cognitive, we misinterpret what we see in the environment relate to our emotion. So our emotion is very vulnerable. It depends on the cognition. If our cognition interpret things negatively, it will affect our emotion. That's why it is important to be optimism, because optimism, always think positive, will affect positively on our emotion. So two factor, there's another theory called two-factor theory, theory of emotions. So it's involve cognitive interpretations and physiological interpretations affect our emotion. Basically, both physiological interpretations and cognitive and interpretations will affect our emotions. So what is meant by physiological interpretation is basically how we interpret things happens in, for example, heartbeat faster. How we interpret that as a sign of anger, as a sign of bad thing, or as a sign of excitement, or sign a good thing. If it is we interpret positively, then it will affect on our emotion positively. If we interpret it as a negative, then it will affect negatively on our emotions. So moving to culture and emotions, emotion also linked to the culture, and even emotion provides support to social norms to the culture. For example, here, for example, it says that we can be emotional about our culture. For example, if people say something bad about our culture, we tend to be defensive, we tend to be more emotional, because culture relate to emotion. We can have the culture affects also our emotion. So we have a very close relationship with the culture. So emotions linked to the culture, especially if we link our feeling to the culture, then we're gonna have good. I mean, the relationship is very close between emotion and culture. However, not all culture recognize same emotion. For example, in the secondary types of emotions, so there are some differences in how different culture recognize the same type of emotion. For example, when you're feeling depressed, the way you show it on your face may be different in other culture. So it's not unique to a certain culture. Is Not all culture recognize the same emotion. You have to bear in mind that. And emotion also can be associated with intellectual functioning. For example, emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is defined as the ability to monitor our own emotions and also emotion of other people. So when we have the ability to manage our own emotions and other people emotion, then we consider as a consider good functioning of our intellect, because we could manage our emotions. So managing our emotion, or we call it emotional intelligence, is very important, because it will avoid having a negative feeling of others. So when we could manage our emotions and the emotion of others, we will not discriminate others. We will work professionally. We do not base on our action based on our interpretations or negative interpretations of other people feeling. So this is very important if nowadays, if we want to work in the organizations that have to deal with the human being with emotion. So having emotional intelligence is very important, because we can use this emotional intelligence as one of the skill to deal with people who come with different kind of background, with emotions, with feeling, and so on. So culture and emotions, like I mentioned, there is a positive relationship between culture and emotions, and some culture they have some emotion that are unique, different from other culture. For example, German people, they have emotions called champagne fruits, for example, a feeling of malicious joy. Japan, they have Hagai. They have Czech Republic, they have lip loss. Tahiti, they have. So this actually unique to their culture, to their country. This emotion that may have the same or different interpretation in other countries, other culture, but maybe the definition basically the same. For example, helpless Hagai, helpless anguish, thing with frustration. Sometimes we also have this, but maybe we call the name differently as in Japan call it. Okay, these few questions are actually planned for tutorial exercise 3. So you have to answer all these questions and then keep aside but do not lose it, because I will collect and we will discuss in the class, or maybe in certain way to discuss this. But this is actually important for your tutorial exercise, so please answer these tutorial exercise questions. Maybe try to answer it all this, and then we will discuss maybe in the class when we have the times. Okay.